have ever experienced regret? You know, regret's a great way for us to learn, painfully, unfortunately. But there is a less painful way of learning regret, and that was other people's regrets. And one of the things years ago that shaped my life so much was a survey that I read. And it was 50 people who were 95 years old and older, and they asked them, what would you do if you were to live life over again? What do you think the number one response was?
Play.
Take more risks. That blew me away. Why don't people take risks? Because of fear. Not just fear of failure, but mainly the fear of what people would think if they knew they failed. And you think 95 years old and older and realizing, wow, all those people are dead now. You know, it's like, the second of the three responses was, smell the roses a lot more along the way. And I sit there and I think about that, and I'm like, you know, spending too much time in the office, not really seeing and being with your family and with your kids. And then I started thinking about, what about today? All the media stuff that's going on, and so many of the older people, for instance, getting stuck in front of the tube watching CNN, Fox, and getting stressed out so much that their health deteriorates, which then drives up the healthcare industry. It's like, this isn't right. And I started looking at, the world is such a tumultuous area, so polarizing right now, the country and the world. And it's like, and they realize they can't do anything about that. And I started looking at things like the suicide rate among youth. And I realized, you know, I have 48 grandchildren. And the thing about it is, when my grandchildren now started having grandchildren, man, in 10 years, I was like, that's mind-blowing. I could end up with like 1 million of them or something like that, the way my kids are. But I'm sitting here thinking, wow, suicide. Then I started thinking about the disconnect that we have. And I remember what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said 80 years ago. We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can always build our youth for the future. And I'm thinking of my 48 grandchildren, but we're not connecting with them. It's that disconnect. Then I was reminded of a story. And it was about a townspeople who were standing on a riverbank. As all of a sudden they were alerted by several people frantically screaming as they were being carried downstream of the raging river. Well, moved by their plight, the carrying townspeople immediately rescued these people from the river's current. As time went on, more and more people were being carried downstream. Research revealed what everyone had suspected, that the bridge further up the river had been badly damaged, and only some of the people were getting across, and more people needed to be rescued. So the town committed most of their annual budget to fixing this problem. They hired professional rescue workers. They built a riverside hospital, created rehabilitation programs, and it invented ever more sophisticated rescue devices. One day, after spending several years of rescuing people from the river, one young man asked, "Hey, why don't we just fix the bridge?" Well, the rescue workers, they were too busy to give any thought to this idea. Still others said, "I don't know where the bridge is." Then there were those who just said, "I don't know how to fix the bridge." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that is exactly the analogy that's going on in the world today. Connections. Bridges build connections. Connections create all kinds of things in people's lives and helpful. We're here connecting. We're building bridges. We're not destroying them, we're building them, and we need that. third thing that the 50 people, 95 and older said, they wish they could leave a legacy. Now, we talked a little bit about legacy here a couple days ago. And it's like, what is a legacy? And I started thinking, legacy with my grandkids. How do I leave a legacy? You know, when I first started looking at that survey, I kind of poo-pooed legacy because I thought maybe that was just something rich people did. You know, to get their names on buildings or something like that. Then I realized that's not what legacy is, because those buildings eventually disappear. Legacy is, sure, they remember you, but it's so amazing how that works. Because we look back in the history of our world and country, and the ones who actually left a legacy that we remember today were never doing it for themselves. They were doing it for everybody else. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Jesus Christ, and even Mother Teresa. We'll remember them. We remember them because they have left a legacy onto us that we keep passing on down and passing on down. And I really started researching this a lot, and I'm thinking, for the last few years, and how can I connect with my grandchildren to leave a lasting legacy? And I started looking back. You know, I mean, Gary here, we take what he teaches us, and we take it, and we take whatever it helps us with our purpose, and we go through, and then we take that purpose, and we keep passing it down from those experiences, right? So I have two experiences that really educated me, because I heard that experience was a better teacher than words and books. One of them was, you know, I just finished 50 years in the workforce. 40 of those years raising kids. And I'm thinking, man, Mom and I, we are sure ready for the empty nest life because we needed rest. Then a 15-year-old grandson had to be moved out of his living conditions because of a thing that happened with his family. And Grandma and Grandpa actually turned out to be the better choice. So we took in a 15-year-old. Now, he was being secluded, he was struggling in school, and he had all those things, but me, I've raised kids. I made sure he had his own room, made sure he had a computer with the internet, he had his own cell phone, because I was looking for leverage to be able to get him to do what I needed him to do to succeed. Well, after taking away his cell phone for the most umpteenth time and grounding him off the computer, he drops out of high school, became more secluded in his room, and severely depressed. Then I remember reading the thought that said, consider how hard it is for us to change. How are we going to be able to change somebody else? And then the voice said, you're not going to change him. And I said, oh my gosh, I have to change. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, so I turned around and just started listening to him. I started learning who he was. I backed off from the dictatorship and the discipline driving thing, and I just listened. He eventually realized that the time I talked with him wasn't about just giving him orders and helping him along the way. It was connecting with him and learning who he was. And when I finally asked him, so what do you want to do in life? And he goes, you know, I think I want to be a professional video game player. The old boomer mind here thinking, what, just sit around playing Pong, Pac-Man, Honky Dong? You know, it's like, but I didn't. I learned with him. I found out that the time that we spent, I learned who he was. He learned who I was. Not by me just telling him, but just by learning who he was. And that was the transmission of legacy. So I'm going to give you a few pointers. Well, kind of one of the things that, I want to give you a few pointers that I've picked up with interacting with my grandchildren. And that was just one of the experiences that I had. One of them is, look for opportunities to spend one-on-one with a child. Not just a grandchild or your child. All children need this. And when you're with them, learn about who they are. Learn about who they are. No opinions, no judgments. When you want to express opinion or a judgment, use questions. We learned that here today. Learn how to express opinion by asking questions. Because opinions and judgments only take you further away from the truth. And I'm looking forward to these years. It's kind of interesting. So I wrap up here today, just a few minutes ago. This is how a grandchild, a 6-year-old. My wife's sitting in Seattle right now at the Delta Lounge, getting ready to fly to go help a grandchild. And she texts a 6-year-old who's going to, Mateo, who's going to be a pilot. And she goes, I told Mateo I was flying alone and I'd be sitting by a stranger who I would be shy to look at or talk to them. He said, well, what happens if you make friends? Oh my gosh. You know, that is profound. My grandson told me, he says, you know, Grandpa, I don't think old people really realize how interesting their life really is. I challenge each of you, all our children, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they're the future leaders of this country. Respect them. Treat them like the future leaders. Because you know what? They're going to be. That's the only way we can fix this country. And sitting there and saying, well, that's the school district's problem. That's our government's problem. No. It's each and every one of you. Do not be blaming anybody else. We are older society, and it's our duty to transfer onto the youth. Because they are our future leaders. And we gotta love them and teach them how to connect. Because it's not he with the most toys that wins, it's he with the most connections wins. And we gotta focus on teaching them and mimicking and showing it to them. Because to me, I think we pushed materialism to the limit on this earth. And we've got to come back to true love and connection. Love is that cement. Thank you.